Hiya, how are you today? I'm feeling great. I just realized I am actually drinking a cup of coffee that has been reheated twice already. I'm obviously not a coffee snob because we had coffee for breakfast. And then Bruce asked me, "Oh, should I reheat this in the pot? Do you want some?" And I said, "Yes." And then he forgot about it. And now I've reheated it again because I wanted a drink before going on the podcast. And I think this is actually quite nice. So I'm sure any like coffee knowing person would probably scream and run away, but it's actually quite nice. Anyway, I wanted to talk to you today about how we can judge ourselves and use everything you're learning, maybe through my podcast or stuff you've learned about how to manage your emotions and how to handle situations and stuff, and how we can then end up using it against ourselves because now we're thinking, I should know better. I shouldn't react like this. I shouldn't get anxiety over this. And I wanted to share a couple of cases with you because I have to be honest and say that I still freak out when I get whatever news I don't want to get. So a couple of weeks ago, my um, clinical manager sent us an email to say that some calls have been lost overnight. They had kind of done a recording of whatever the calls thing they look at, and they could see that we missed some calls, and they just wanted to inquire about why that was. And I just became so defensive in that moment. And I know a few of my colleagues did as well, because we were like, well, what do you expect us to do if we are short staffed and then we can't answer all the calls? And sometimes people call, but then they realize that it's an emergency line and then they hang up. And sometimes people just call to let us know they're outside the door and we see them and open up before we take the call. And obviously, my manager doesn't know all this, but I could feel myself getting my knickers in a right twist over this. And then I realized actually they're just asking information. They're just asking what is happening and whether we should do something about it and if there's something we need, better phones or whatever. But my immediate reaction was definitely tension, maybe a bit frustration, and totally having this manual about how managers should behave and not behave, and don't write to my email when I'm out of work, and this and the other. And it was literally nothing serious. They were not telling me that I had killed somebody and what happened, right? And I also spoke to a client who's almost finishing her coaching program with me now. So she's very, very self-aware. And also her boss texted her um when she was home just to point out something that I at the clinic. And my client also got this, tension, anxiety, and started straight away to go to like worst case scenarios and this and the other and imaginary conversation with the boss and so on. And I asked her then, I said, how long did it actually take for you before you kind of calmed down and came to a neutral place and not freaking out? And she was like, oh, it took me an hour. And that is perfectly normal. Even if you are very well regulated, emotionally adult, everything self-aware, your nervous system and your brain is still going to freak out when, for example, you get a text from your manager or maybe get the dreaded email from the Royal College about a complaint or something. It's just our first reaction is always going to be there. We're never going to be able to overcome that and control our nervous system before it reacts. It's just not possible because we are still humans and our brains will always be looking out for danger and attacks and being defensive. The thing is, how can you manage it? So once it happens to you, and once you realize you're anxious, you're frustrated, you're in a state you don't want to be in, and you're out of work, and you'd like to enjoy your time out of work, you don't want to be spinning in all this resentment and anger and anxiety. Like, first of all, using it against yourself, saying, "Oh, I shouldn't feel like this. Why am I so upset over something so stupid?" First of all, it's normal. Your brain and your nervous system feel under attack and they react and they let you know that something has happened and you should react to it. And that is completely normal. And then it'd be interesting, once you have done a bit of this work on yourself, to measure how long does it take for you to kind of process all this and get to a calm, neutral place where you can sort of forget about it. Are we talking an all-nighter where you're like ruminating, can't fall asleep, or wake up at 2 o'clock and go, I should have said, or I will tell them, and you literally cannot enjoy your night or your day off or your weekend because of this thing that happened? Or are we talking an hour or two where you kind of like go through this process of, you know, thinking about what you're going to say, what happened, and this and the other, and then you come to a neutral place? Because that's really important to measure. Because if you don't measure it, you're not going to know if you have evolved in any way or form, or you're just this constantly anxious or frustrated person. So those are the two first things. Don't use the state you're in against yourself, thinking that you've done something wrong or you are wrong for not being able to handle this in a perfect way, because you will always be human. That's not going to change. And second, measure, am I just freaking out and letting my brain freak out all night, all weekend? Or am I getting it under control in a couple of hours or less? Another thing I want to say as well is, if you're not able to process or deal with it in that moment, because maybe you're in the cinema with your kids, or maybe you are going in to do something, or maybe you're just too tired, like, don't beat yourself up for buffering until you can deal with it, because we're just not always in a mental state where we can prepare and we can process emotions and we can kind of like get a really clear image of what's going on in our head or meditate on something. Sometimes it's just not possible. I was listening to a psychologist the other day, and she said she was talking about how she was waiting outside the doctor's. She was sitting in the waiting room and she was waiting for some potentially bad news. I can imagine they were going to tell her whether she had cancer or not, or something along those lines. And she was sitting there and was getting really anxious. And she just took her phone out and started playing on it or scrolling on social media. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with buffering, avoiding the situation a bit if you just can't deal with it in that moment, if it's a bit too much, until maybe you can get to talk to your partner or you can speak to somebody and just help you process it a bit. You don't have to, as soon as you get some bad news as an upsetting message or email, in that moment be super calm and then process it and do it all. It's okay to buffer by doing something, or scrolling on social media, or watching something on Netflix or something, until you can kind of be in the right place to deal with whatever it is. No. So let's say you get this email or you get a text or something happens where you are freaking out, but there's nothing you can do about it in that moment. Because if you're at work and another vet says to you, or a client confronts you with something, in that moment, you kind of have to deal with it. But it's actually worse when we can't do anything about it in the moment. For example, an email in the weekend where you can't really do anything about whatever it is, and you're just left with your own brain freaking out over this thing and overanalyzing everything, right? So if you get something when you're out of work, first of all, you want to notice how you're feeling. You want to take a seat and you want to, or stand still and just stop and say, okay, so am I angry? Am I frustrated? And am I anxious? What's going on inside of me? Have I got is my chest tight? Is my throat tight? Am I getting a headache? Is it like something throbbing in my, in my head? Have I got a knot in my stomach? Really feel into it and breathe into it and acknowledge the feeling is there, because your brain and your body are telling you something has happened and you need to defend yourself. And you just need to, in return, letting your brain and body know that, okay, I'm on it, I feel it, I see it, I'm acknowledging it, and I'm gonna deal with it. Because if you try to push it away and tell yourself, I shouldn't be anxious over this, and why am I so upset, or why am I so defensive, then it's like when a toddler wants to show you a drawing they've made, and they're like pulling your sleeve, and you're like, no, no, not now, not now, not now. And they just keep pulling until, you then finally look at the drawing and then they leave you alone. It's the same with your brain and your nervous system. If they're sending you signals and you're ignoring them, then it's just going to get worse and worse. So you want to stop and you want to acknowledge the feeling you're having, which could be defensive, angry, frustrated, anxious, whatever it is. And then you can either write down all the scenarios that are going on in your head. So, for example, for me, if I'm upset about my manager saying that I missed some phone calls, then like, what am I thinking? How I'm having a manual for managers should not write emails about this, or they don't know what they're talking about, and all the things that I want to say, and all the things, I can write them all down. And and kind of get a picture of what's going on in my brain and just weeding out the facts from the thoughts and all the assumptions I might be making that I'm not going to catch if it's just a mental loop that's spiraling around in my head. And then you can, once you get it all on paper and you kind of like acknowledge how you're feeling, you calm yourself down a bit, plan your next step. Right. So I can't do anything about it right now, but tomorrow I'm going to write an email, or I will text them back and say, can we have a meeting tomorrow? Or whatever it is you want to do, just plan your next step. And you don't have to do anything in that moment. And I would actually not encourage you to react back and respond in that moment or do anything because you might want to sleep on it. You know, the old saying, sleep on it and it will be much better tomorrow, is actually not a bad saying, because if you can kind of go through the whole emotional turmoil and come out sort of neutral, if you can analyze all your thoughts and see what's going on and get a picture, then you're going to be much calmer and in a better place and not make the situation any worse by lashing out and being defensive and negative. No, then you can have like a constructive discussion about what's going on. And actually, if you keep doing this, you will learn to do it on the go. It's not like the rest of your life you will have to have a journal with you and write down everything that's happening to you if you don't want to. I know a lot of us struggle with this work to actually sit down and write down, because if there's something uncomfortable going on in our head, we don't want to address it. We don't really want to dig into it. We don't want to work on something that's uncomfortable and something we don't want to look at and something that might produce shame in us or something that might make us feel more resentful, or have to acknowledge that we were actually, yes, we were wrong and the feedback we're getting is actually correct. We don't really want to see that, right? We just want to push it away and sit on our high horse, no? In reality. So that's why we actually have to write it down in the beginning, so we can kind of get used to it and we can teach our brains to do this work and get a better perspective instead of just sitting in that loop, no? But on with time, you can learn to do it on the go. You can process, think, take some time, and not have to make a big deal out of it. So that's just kind of a bit of hope for you if you're starting out with this work and you're like, do I have to like sit and write the Bible every time I get upset about something? No, you don't. Not at all. And then the last thing, which I mentioned before, is time it from you get the news till you manage to get yourself calm again and kind of feel, okay, I've got under control. Something bad happened. Somebody told me something I didn't like, but I don't have to sit here and just swim around in misery about it. You know, I can actually just process it and make a plan and then forget about it until I can do something about it. How long does it take you? Because it's really important that you realize that it's very normal to have the initial reaction. Then you go through some steps. And then at some point, you get to a neutral, calm place where you don't feel like shit, basically. How long does that take? And in that way, you're not going to beat yourself up for reacting the wrong way and not be this robot who can just take everything in their stride and, you know, and just be like calm and enlightened. I think the only person on who ever managed to do that was Buddha. Everybody else, every other human on earth will always react when they have bad news. It's just how you process it and how you react after that that is fully in your power. And it's really fun to start, like I said, measuring it and see how much better you get at handling it. Because then you really feel you're in control, and then you feel you start to win, and everything just changes for you. That's what I have for you today. If you have any feedback on this, let me know. If there's something going on for you right now that you're struggling with and you're like, no, there's no way I can process this. This is just terrible. This complaint is eating me up. By all means, reach out for a free consult or email me or text me, whatever it is. Like, I'm promise you I can help you get a perspective so you don't have to be like swimming in misery because of something bad that happened. Bad things happen to all of us, but the power we have is how we react to it. And I can teach you to react better, react quicker, and come to a place where you don't have to suffer unnecessarily on top of some shit that's already going on. So I'm here for you anytime. Remember, you can book a consult, you can message me, email me. I'm on so many different social media. You can reach me no matter what, and I will never judge you or make assumptions. And I'm always here to just maybe ask you some questions to open up a bit about it. Okay, that was all for now. See you next week. Bye.